Before we get started, just a quick note, spoiler alert.
And we are adults, and I will try very hard not to use adult language, but this is the warning.
Hello and welcome to Fright Bites. My name is Jennifer.
And my name is Sadina. Each episode, we will feature a short story or novella. You can read along with us by finding the full reading list posted on our website, lastlibraryonTheLeft.com, or our social media at LLOTL Podcast.
And today we're discussing the first in a duology titled Silver in the Wood by Emily Tesh. It was published in 2019 by Tor.com. The official...
Surprise.
I know, yeah, surprise. Like, this is officially the Tor.com 31 Days of Horror books. I truthfully don't mind. They've been pretty decent, with the exception of one, X's Fries, right? That's the only one.
No, that wasn't theirs.
Oh, well, see, there you go. So official summary from Goodreads as per usual. There is a wild man who lives in the deep quiet of Green Hollow, and he listens to the wood. Tobias, tethered to the forest, does not dwell on his past life, but he lives a perfectly unremarkable existence with his cottage, his cat, and his dryads. When Green Hollow Hall acquires a handsome, intensely curious new owner in Henry Silver, everything changes. Old secrets, better left buried, are dug up, and Tobias is forced to reckon with his troubled past, both the green magic of the woods and the dark things that rest in its heart.
I just realized it didn't really mention anything about Fabian.
No, it didn't mention anything about Fabian.
At all, any of the actual horror.
Nope.
Huh. Walked right behind me for no reason. Okay, cool.
Yeah, none of the actual horror was mentioned, which is Fabian. But also, I think that lends this, because I told you, this is more like fantasy romance to me.
Yeah. All right, guys. So the first in the duology, Silver in the Wood, it does have horror aspects. And so does the second one, Drowned Country, technically, because there's a vampire. But that bird is going to come through. I just know it is.
I heard it.
So loud.
I heard it.
I'm so sorry. When he wants attention, he starts playing with that stupid bird toy. Anyway, but there's also a lot of witchcraft in this, and there's fae and stuff like that. So there are elements of fantasy horror to it. It's definitely not the darkest thing on our list.
Right. I think this is a good break for our listeners if it's getting to be too much, because it really isn't as, I mean, it is dark, but it's not as dark as some of the other ones. And it does have more romance, and it's just fun. I mean, it's not fun, but I love the
second one is fun.
Yeah, the second one is more fun. I love the character development in both of the novels. I just loved everything about these two books.
So my very first two notes for this, the first one says big pagan druid energy, which yes. Yeah. And then my second one, because I was reading all the books out of order, my second note is this actual queer main characters? I was like, yes.
Yeah. So when I figured it out, because at one point Silver and Tobias are having a conversation, and Tobias he suggested, is he flirting with me or something? I was like, oh.
Yeah, and that's kind of funny because Tobias has been on his own for so long at this point. It wasn't until after he was like, wait, which Tobias, I feel you deeply. That has happened a lot. I get it.
Yeah, it was nice, to be honest, to see, because we've had such a mixture, but I don't know that we've had a gay story yet.
It's a very soft romance too.
Yeah.
You know? It's very slow burn. They're both very awkward, and I don't know, it's just soft. It's really sweet. I like it, even amidst all the horror and immortality. And in the very beginning, I was convinced it was going to be old gods because it was the woods and the way that they talked about the woods, but I should have known it was magic because there were dryads.
Yeah, I didn't. The dryads, so I am not familiar with that lore. And so it kind of threw me off, and I was like, okay.
So you don't know any of the Britannia history behind the Green Man?
No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is all new to me.
This is all very pagan, druid, old magic type mythology, earth magic, things like that. Very good mythology if you ever get into it. The Green Man is a very fascinating character in history.
I mean, it's good, and it made me want to read more about it, because this might be my first time reading about, for real, reading about it and actually getting into the lore. So I really enjoyed that, just because it was something completely new for me. me. So one of the things that I wrote and I texted you was Tobias Finch is the character's name. And in Silver in the Wood, we get most of the book is from the perspective of Tobias. I texted Ida because I kept thinking of Tobias Funke. And for those that don't know, which you should know, he is a character from Arrested Development.
And he blew himself, which like is not as, but also is as inappropriate as it's, I don't know. Tobias Funke is not the character you need to have in mind.
No.
When reading about Tobias Finch. And I was like, oh no, Jennifer.
And it's really just the Tobias and the F last name that did it.
I was telling her earlier that the person I had in my mind was like if Hagrid and the brawny towel man had a baby.
Yeah.
And that's who I had in mind.
And that is completely accurate for the actual description. Don't go by mine. Mine was just based on the name. Okay, if you don't know Tobias Funke from Arrested Development, which shame on you, go watch it right now. He's also the gif of the man sobbing in the shower.
Yes, holding onto the wet wash rag and just sobbing in the shower. It's one of my favorite gifs to use.
Oh, you say gif and I say gif. Oh,
I do. And we could get into a whole discussion about that because we had a whole discussion about it in library school, but
yeah, it's such a huge discussion. But yeah, anyways, I love Tobias. He's probably my favorite character of all of them just because he's so grumpy, I feel, but so cute.
See, I didn't think of him as grumpy. I thought of him as like methodical and he thinks everything through. Even before he became the Green Man, you get the impression that aside from Fabian, he like thought through everything. It feels like his routine in his pacing in life is so set. In fact, he reminds me of what would have been perfect for the Hollow caretaker in general. He kind of moved slowly like the woods and took his time, and I liked it. The Dryads really liked him too.
Yeah. So yeah, I only thought of him as grumpy because of the way he interacted with Silver in the very beginning. Seemed kind of like inconvenienced.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, he hadn't really come face to face with an actual human in many, many years. Yeah. And that was the other thing too, is that poor Tobias kind of didn't really have a good way to track time except for Fabian, you know? Yes. So like
I also loved Silver because Silver was so charming.
He was charming in the first book through Tobias's eyes. Yes. Now that is someone who is looking at someone they're attracted to through rose-colored glasses. That is absolutely, because in the second book, y'all, he is not charming. No. He is the biggest derp in the world.
In my notes for the second book, I was like, I kind of like Silver a little bit less. But I still love him.
That's fair.
One of the things I really felt a lot and connected with, which I think is why I will end up purchasing these books, is I felt that apprehension and that anxiety that Tobias experienced from his past toxic relationship with Fabian and his hesitancy with Silver.
Yeah. So Fabian is the eventual antagonist who is alluded to as sort of a seasonal, he comes around and he terrorizes the local town, which has a festival or whatever to celebrate. That also puts them at risk for the Lord of Summer, and they have some awareness of it because people go missing during that time. And Tobias works as the Green Man to not only watch over the Hollow Wood, but to try to keep Fabian from abducting people. And you kind of get this like creeping feeling that it's a cycle that he can't break out of, which that was their toxic relationship in general. But then you find out how Fabian became what he is as the Lord of Summer, and it was so terrible. And it was toxic, yes, like you said. So sad.
Yeah.
I actually thought that for a little bit, I thought Fabian was a Fae King who was coming out and stealing people for the summer.
Me too, because I have read my fair share of Fae lore, and a lot of times it's featured heavily in supernatural romances from the early 2000s, a lot of Fae lore. And so I was like, oh, that's a Fae King. That's for sure a Fae King, but no.
Well, and the reason I had to dismiss it was because when Silver brings up, because Silver thinks it's a Fae King too, and Tobias dismisses it completely, and he kind of describes fairies as like flippant and unaware of the existence of other creatures, their existence. And he was like, they kidnap children out of curiosity and jealousy, but they forget to feed them. And he was like, fairies are dumb. I was like, oh, okay, sure. And the Lord of Summer was not kidnapping people for funsies or curiosity. You got the feeling that the Lord of Summer was kidnapping people out of a grotesque imitation of possession, obsession. That gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, I think the grotesque possession, but I think he felt entitled to take those people.
Yes, he
You
did.
know?
And I think that whatever entity in the forest enticed him or seduced him into murder and suicide for magic, because you do find out at the end that, yes, Fabian himself was a cruel man, but he was seduced by something as well that was older than him and had an altar. And that thing was conceited and arrogant. Its version of love was cruel and twisted.
Yeah.
So it took Fabian and then it lived its cruelty through Fabian, and all of it was terrible and toxic. And there's even like a throwaway comment from Tobias who talks about how he was worried for Silver because Fabian goes after young, pretty things. And I was like, bleh, blech. Gross.
Yeah, Fabian scared me a lot because he reminded me of an ex that I had who I didn't date this ex for long. He would, how do I put this? He wanted to get married within like a couple weeks, and I'm like, no. And very clearly, I am brown, and he was not. And he would make overly racist comments. He would sexualize me a lot in ways that I didn't appreciate. I mean, he was just very, very toxic.
Did he like fetishize you being exotic like that?
Yeah.
Exoticism?
And then he would turn around and sort of insult my culture too. Just really, really toxic.
Jeez.
And I would just kind of ignore those comments because I rather ignore them than address them sometimes, which is not good. So we lasted about maybe 8 weeks, but I really kept thinking about him when I was reading this, because like, how easy would it have been for me to get drawn into such a toxic relationship had I stayed? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
thank God I got out of that so early, because he was just so weird towards the end there, which that's another story for another time. But I really just kept thinking, Fabian is this guy. I know him. He's that person.
That's unnerving.
It was really unnerving, like really, really unnerving. But I didn't write too many notes for this book because I just thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a good, like you said earlier, palate cleanser. Sweet, a little scary in Fabian, but overall kind of a romance story.
Yeah.
Even with the dryads, like Bramble was a sassy little shit. I loved her.
So yeah, let's talk about the female characters in the book. Bramble was freaking awesome. Silver's mom, who I just realized her name was Adela, she was, oh my God.
She was savage to her child.
She was savage. Such a savage. And she knew it. He knew it. He wanted nothing to do with his mom. Loved Mrs. Silver. She reminds me a little bit of my mom, who's somewhat savage with me.
Yeah, that was what I liked about her, is that even first meeting her in the first book, where you don't get a lot of her in the first book, but what you do get, she is so dismissive of her child, who you had been seeing through Tobias's rose-tinted glasses, his like Twitter painted glasses. And he, you kind of got the idea that Silver was a little flighty, but for the most part, very serious about his historian monster hunting duties, which is what he was. Professionally speaking, he was a monster hunter. His mom comes in the picture and she's like, that dippy little thing. No, he's like, she immediately lays into him, and you're like, oh, this poor man. And she was like, oh, you must be the new man he's infatuated with. And I was like, you ain't even like subtle. You just,
she is who I want to be.
Yeah, she didn't care shit about her child flirting with this guy or trying to keep cool or his image. And she was like, no, you're an idiot. Like, how many times have you been dragged through the mud by a man? It's like, bro, you can't just be giving people's history away like that.
She did it so coolly and calmly.
Like it was common knowledge. Like,
she was so funny. Oh my God.
No wonder Silver ran off without you.
Nobody dismissed you.
But then his dumbass does get abducted by Fabian. So, you know, she's not wrong completely.
But it was just such a great book. And this book is less than 100 pages.
Yeah, but it was such amazing in-depth story. The imagery, the scenery, the character development, everything was so beautiful and so rich that you forget that they're novellas,
Yeah, this one made me feel, well, both of them made me feel. After I finished them, I was just like left rosy and just feeling good about life. Just, ooh, like this is why I read. You know what I mean? Like this is why you read books.
Yeah, I'm not really a romance reader,
Yeah.
but every once in a while when I finish this, I was like, I want a queer romance. Why can't I find someone?
Yeah, this one made me question, like, why am I alone? Like, let me download a dating app and get out there. But no, I did not. I just loved it. They were just so cute. And I loved them. And I want to hug Tobias. I mean, I'll hug Silver, I guess. But like, Tobias, that gentle giant.
The only other thing that we really need to talk about with this one is that after Fabian kidnaps Silver and Silver is dead, because the entire point of Fabian kidnapping people is to, I don't know, the Lord is, whatever. So Silver's dead and Tobias and Adela are distraught, but the Dryads help bring him back. There's a new agreement set with the Wood where Tobias is now mortal and he's no longer the keeper of the Hollow Wood.
Yeah.
And it's Silver's job. So he's immortal, but at least he was revived. They defeated Fabian. They even defeated the weird entity that had seduced Fabian. So everything ended really well.
So when this ended, because it did, to me, it completely ended. I was just like, what are we going to see in the second book? Because I don't know, because it ended so well. And I would have been, just like the Molly Southworm book, I would have been totally fine with it just being a one-off.
But like the Molly book, I needed the second book.
Exactly. Didn't know I needed it. So thankful you wrote the second one. Thank you, Emily. But yeah, I liked that at the end that Tobias was sort of freed to live his own life, because he was basically a loner. He had himself, the cat, and the Dryads, and he didn't really do anything. So it was kind of nice to see them switch places. And I didn't think that the Wood would tame Silver, but one could only hope.
Yeah, I kind of was like, okay, well, this is going to give Tobias the chance to rediscover his life, to live in the modern world, and to be an assistant to Adela where Silver failed. But it's also going to give Silver a new appreciation for learning to stand still somewhere and mature.
Yeah.
And I think they both needed that. And they were still able to pursue their romantic relationship, which was nice for the both of them. I mean, Bramble hated it because Bramble was not amused by Silver.
No, Bramble was not. I mean, I understand, because if Silver was next to me, I'd be like, listen, you're gonna have to go somewhere else with that nonsense. I just can't.
Yeah. And her defense too, she was able to be with Tobias in a way that he understood the Wood. He was on a psychic connection with the Wood that took hundreds of years to get to.
Yeah.
And now she's got this flailing, faulty thing. And then she was like, fuck, really? This is what I get?
I had Batman, and then you gave me Robin. It was so funny. Poor Bramble.
I know. I do really like Silver. I don't like him as much in the second book, where you're not reading his character through Twitter-pated passes, which just really strips away a lot of the pleasant parts about him. But we'll talk more about that. I got some notes.
Yeah. I think with that, we will end this one.
Yeah.
And we'll see y'all tomorrow for the second book, Drowned Country, which we thought this whole time it was Drowned City. So there you go.
And by we, she means me, and I kept influencing the way she said it. Just like Eldenhaven, by the way.
Oh my God.
My dyslexic butt, and the way anyway, whatever. Y'all, I'm not smart. People think I'm so smart sometimes. And I'm like, but am I? I'm Silver. Everyone's like, oh, Twitter painted by the tricks my brain plays because it has photographic memory and recall and stuff. But really, you strip all that away and I'm just a dippy little thing.
So funny.
That's a fun way to go into the next.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
If you liked listening to us ramble on about horror, subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends. And if you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram or Facebook at LLOTL Podcast.
Check out our website by going to lastlibraryontheleft.com. Be sure to visit our About Us page to discover our 2 truths and a lie. Or, if you'd like to send us an email, you can reach us at somethingwicked@lastlibraryontheleft.com.